Good afternoon or morning or whatever it is. My name is Lahav, and I'm about to present my work. I always like to start from the end, from the last work I did. And this poster was done like 2 weeks ago. I don't know why the word jungle popped into my mind, and then I remembered the Bare Necessities song from the Jungle Book. And then somehow I had the twist of Bare Necessities just by the week that the COP26 conference was ended. A great disappointment it was. In general, I don't like to present my posters. I think that the work should speak for itself, but as posters keep silent, even when they are yelling, I have to stand now here and speak about them. This is the Ars Electronica Center in Linz, Austria. I visited there a few years ago, I think it was 2015. Huge festival of technology and arts and innovation, and everything over there is the future. In 2015, it was Mercedes who presented the first time, for the first time, the autonomic car. And by the very same time, refugees from Syria fled Europe, flooded all the train stations in Hungary and in Austria and in Germany, exactly the same days. This little kid, we would never hear about him unless this picture came online on September 2nd. I assume that we all saw this picture, one of the most heartbreaking pictures I ever saw in my life. And at the very same time, this is another picture. I don't even imagine how it feels to hold this body of this little boy. And at the very same time, we were sitting in conference rooms and went through galleries and see everything that has to do with the future. Jumping for a minute to Tommy Ungerer, one of the great late Tommy Ungerer, one of the great illustrators in the 20th century. This is a poster he did in late 60s. And this is a poster I did in Linz. I left the conference room and I went to my hotel room and I opened the MacBook and I did this poster because I couldn't stand the idea that thousands of people talk about the future while no one could offer a future for one little boy. So I did this poster and printed it in Linz. Tommy Ungerer was a great humanist. At a certain point in the 60s, he was the most famous children's books author and illustrator in the United States. But then he started to do posters, political posters, every now and then. This is a posters in an exhibition in Zurich. I will talk about the exhibition soon. And the Americans didn't like the fact that someone who came from France is now doing posters against the American people or against the American policy in Vietnam and the racism issues. And he had to leave the States. And this wall of his posters is from an exhibition that took place in the Design Museum in Zurich 3 years ago. An exhibition in which The Future is a Little Dead Boy was presented as well. Among 3 other works of mine that I did in different occasions, in different times, one of them was for a young woman who refused to serve in the Israeli army as long as the occupation takes place. One was for the 56th Independence Day of Israel, and one was against the Russian involvement in the Syrian bombings. I always care for people. These are 2 posters. Both of them won prizes afterwards, but I care not about the prizes as much as I care about the situation itself, which I have something to say about. On the left, as I said, this young woman, this young Israeli woman who sat in prison. I mean, she was willing to pay the price of her concepts of life, of not willing to go to the Israeli army as long as the occupation takes place. And on the right-hand side, there's a poster of a young Jordanian woman who crossed the border between Jordan and Israel 2 years ago and was arrested by the Israeli army, held in administrative detention for 100 and something days, 140 days, and then was released without any explanations. And this is a poster I did maybe probably the most printed poster of mine ever. I did it as a reaction to my students in Bezalel Academy of Arts and Design, who didn't supply any good work when by the week that the Me Too campaign began in 2017. I just wanted to show them what one can do in such a case, and I did this poster a few hours after I launched it on Facebook. It had so many reactions that 3 or 4 hours afterwards I took it to a printing house and printed it in 1,000 copies. Later on, I started to send a printable PDF to any organization around the world who asked for it, and I think it was printed in thousands of copies all over the world. But my posters are not about myself and not about my achievements. It always has to do something with the outer world. And when 2 young Tel Avivian women approached me and asked to spread these posters in cafes and bars, in boutiques around Tel Aviv, and collect money for purposes of feminist organizations, I just gave them the poster, as long as with 2 other posters which I had by then, one for the Why Didn't Report campaign and one for the International Women's Day in 2019. They printed the posters and they collected thousands of shekels, which they gave to a shelter for women who suffered from domestic violence. I think this is where the posters come to a position or to the right position in the world as I wish them to come, and I'm always glad that this happens. Afterwards, someone approached me and asked to do a shirt. This is my daughter. And then the shirt started to spread all over, and I think it's nice. These are women from the Israeli media. And then I feel that I did something. Few years afterwards, there's this story of the young British woman, a tourist who went to Cyprus, and as she complained in police, she was allegedly raped by 12 young Israelis. Then she was accused of provoking the whole story, of inventing the whole story, and she was stood trial in Cyprus, and a group of activists from Israel went to support her on trial. They called me the night before and said, "Will you not make us a poster?" So I did it the same night and I printed it, and this poster was outside of the courtroom in Limassol. Gladly, I can say that it was on the front page of the Evening Standard. And now if I need a picture of this poster, I have to pay Getty Images to get a picture of my own poster. But more than that, it functioned where it was supposed to function, and this is what is so important about it. I deal with everything, big issues and smaller issues. One day someone calls me and said that 2 young girls from the school of his children are about to be deported back to the Philippines because their parents were Filipinos, but these girls were born in Israel, and he needs my help. So I take this image of these 2 little girls, and I make these 2 posters. It's in Hebrew, but you have the translation at the bottom. The posters aim for children, and yet, of course, adults can read them. And then at the bottom, I have this message, because I don't like to do posters without any action item. I think that action items are really important, otherwise it's useless. So I'm looking for the phone numbers of the Internal Affairs Minister. I put the phone numbers of his phone numbers on the posters, and I urge the kids to send him messages in order to cancel the decision. I wouldn't say that this is what made him cancel the decision, and yet this is what I can do about it, and definitely show young kids that we have to be activists and do what we have to do, or what we can do. I think that it sums the whole idea of what I'm doing in terms of social design, or what I believe is the crafts of activism. I'm doing posters because I believe this is what I can do sometimes in order to change something. And I'm everywhere. Everything in the world is my business. I'm all over the place. I do posters about almost anything in the world. For instance, I'm spending time in Shanghai a few years ago, and a friend from New York calls me and says, "Why don't you do anything about Trump?" Now, I can't do anything about Trump outside of having this series of posters that has to do with the word fake. So I did this series of posters. I have 12 posters eventually. Some of them go to museums eventually. But mostly what is interesting is that it goes to the place, to New York or wherever, and people do with it whatever they want. I deal with, as I said, with anything. And when I hear in the beginning of the corona, when I sat home and couldn't go out, I hear this story of a music group Yorum, a Turkish folk, protest folk music, a wonderful group that exists for more than 20 years. One day we hear that the singer, Helene Bolek, is passing away after hundreds of days of hunger strike. Because she protests against the decisions of Erdogan. A few weeks afterwards, the bass player is dying from the same reason, and a few months afterwards, their advocate, the human rights activist Ebru Timtik, is dying also after a hunger strike. I have to do something about it. I have to send to my friends in Turkey posters regarding this issue. I cannot rest without doing it. But I do things for anything that has to do with climate and climate change. The poster, the Earth Day from the last Earth Day, 2021. There's a poster from Earth Day 2011. And racism, of course, is a huge issue that bothers me always. So there's a poster for Martin Luther King Day. George Floyd, a terrible story that we all know about. A few days after I do this poster, a friend of mine, a club owner here in Tel Aviv, a music club owner, asks me, don't you have anything that Black Lives Matter in Hebrew? So within a few minutes, I do the poster that says Black Lives Matter in Hebrew too, and I put it in around the club. And then when I go to lecture for young children, I give them posters, and now all of them have posters at homes. But mostly, of course, I'm bothered with inner Israeli politics and, of course, the occupation. Here are a group of posters. The top ones has to do with the occupation, and the bottom ones have to do with the Israeli politics, which is mainly governed by Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi, for the last 20 or so years. The two in the middle are posters that I did for the Rabin Memorial Day, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. This is something that I do for years. Actually, every year I do a poster for the Memorial Day of Yitzhak Rabin. It's not that I like the person personally so much when he was alive. Of course, I never was his follower or voter. But I came back from New York after a few years of living in New York with two young kids, and I thought to myself, how do you educate kids that you don't kill someone because you don't like their opinions? And then I said to myself, I will do a poster once a year. I'll go with the kids to the ceremony or whatever, to the memorial event in the Rabin Square in Tel Aviv, and we'll give posters for free. So for years we do it. I print 500 copies every year, and it became almost, I don't know, probably my largest body of work in one issue. Every year I do a poster. But it's not only about big issues. A few months ago, in February, I'm lying in bed after going through operation in my stomach, and I'm suffering, and of course I'm the poorest person on earth, and I can't even stand the pain. And someone keeps sending me messages through Messenger that she needs my help, and she needs my help, and she needs my help. And I think to myself, oh, I have to call her and yell at her that she doesn't even know what my situation is. So I do call her, but while I'm waiting for her to answer, I already think to myself, first I'll hear what she has to say, and then maybe I'll tell her my position. And she tells me a story about her daughter who's suffering a disease that is called de novo mutation. How rare can a disease be? It doesn't even have a Wikipedia on it. I mean, this is something that I could never believe happens. And she tells me there's a rare disease day. They call it also orphan disease because no one cares about it. No medical company or something wants to invest in a disease that 2,000 people around the world suffer from. And I tell her I'll do something in order to explain to people how rare something can be. So I do this campaign for her. But when I promised her on Thursday evening that by Friday morning she'll have a campaign, she said, but you are after operations, you're just after operation. I said, what is a little bit of a pain in my stomach comparing to the story you told me. And this is where I try always to keep myself, as I tell my kids, life is not about us. There's always something bigger than us, and we can think for a few minutes that we are very poor and we suffer, but then we can always remember that someone else might need our help. And I'll finish with personal issues. This is my dad. This week we marked the 3rd year since he passed away. This is a picture taken in a hospital on my birthday, my 52nd birthday, where he was hospitalized for what I would say the beginning of his deterioration until he passed away 2 years afterwards. I sneaked a bottle of wine to the hospital and we celebrated my birthday. And although through the years we had many, many arguments, my dad and myself, ideologically we're in different positions. The picture, when you see the smaller finger, shows that we have the same genes probably. This is a picture from years before when I was just born. And I'm talking about my dad because he was a good tutor or teacher for life. And when I was 7 or 8 years old, one day we had a flat tire and he taught me how to replace a flat tire. And I was small and very weak. And he told me that I should stand on the Lagrange and jump on it. And then he said, it might take 5 minutes or it might take 5 years, but eventually every screw is about to be open if you push it hard enough. And this I keep remember. It's not about changing or measuring what you change. It's about keep doing it. And by this, I finish. I work day and night. I hardly sleep, so I have a lot of time to work. I work day and night, and I never stop to ask myself whether it has a purpose or something. I think that the mere doing something, the idea of doing something is a purpose in itself, and I don't want to stop and contemplate about the idea of whether it does something or doesn't do anything. Thank you so much.